All right, we're live. See how much stuff I can get done on Holiday Brain. Holidays are coming up. This is my last stream of the year, and then I'll be back next year. But just wanted to show off some of the new stuff from vCluster. So some of this is 4.1, and then some of this is going to be 4.2. So right now I'm on 4.21, which is the latest release, which has updates and stuff from 4.2, which just came out. All right, let me bring up chat too. Yeah, if you have any questions or anything like that, just let me know. Post in chat. If you're watching this after it's been live, what you can do is you can post in the comments, and we'll try to answer those questions too. Or join us on Slack and ask there. But what we're going to do today is show off a demo of the external database connector, and then I'm also going to show some cost control. But let's do some cleanup real quick. All right, so here's the UI. A new version's come out, right? Like it's letting me know for all my virtual clusters that, hey, there's a new version. So what I can do is I can easily go in here and I can upgrade my templates to make sure that I'm using the latest version of vCluster. And now if I go back over to here, I can sync to upgrade. So I'm gonna sync all these to upgrade, and it's gonna upgrade the version from, what were they on previously? Now they're updated. An older version to a new version, right? So 21.2 now. So while those are upgrading, what we're going to do is, let me hop over to this. So we're going to do a couple things. Let me get the blog open too, so I can kind of go over what I'm going to talk about. So we're going to set up a MySQL database app. We're going to create a template with that app so that whenever we deploy a virtual cluster, that application is going to be deployed with that virtual cluster. We're just basically setting up a very basic MySQL database that we can connect our virtual clusters into. So the thought process behind this is, let's say you're already managing a database and you don't want to use SQLite, which is going to be the default for the vClusters coming up. Maybe you've got a use case where you need to do something that's highly available, or you just have a database where you want to be able to store stuff, back it up, and you've already got that process, streamlined, and you don't want to manage another database or even just use the local SQLite. Well, what you can do is you can set up a template that will allow you to, you can set up a connection in the template that'll allow you to connect to that database. Previously, it was going to be like a per virtual cluster setup, but now what you can do is actually create a secret instead in the namespace for where the virtual cluster platform is running, and it'll use that secret and it'll connect to the database instead of saying, MySQL connection string in the template configuration. So it makes it a little bit easier to scale out so that you're not setting that up each time and creating a database in the database. This will go ahead and create a database for you as long as it has access to that database and it can connect. So let's show that off. All right, so what we're going to start out with is we're going to create a template for our virtual cluster. And we're going to, we'll go back. We're going to create an application. So here is a MySQL application that has a persistent volume and a persistent volume claim. We're going to give it about 20 gigs of storage. We can probably do way less. Let me update this. Let's do 2 gigs of storage. Should be plenty. And then we're going to set up a service for a load balancer, which is going to make this MySQL database accessible over a load balancer. We're putting this into a template, so when that virtual cluster comes up, it's going to request a load balancer IP address. You can use a node port if you want locally. You can use something else. We're just going to use a load balancer because I'm running this all on-prem, and load balancers are free for me, right? So, but if you're running in the cloud, maybe you're going to use something else. You're going to use a node port or something like that. But this is a very basic setup for MySQL. Maybe you're not even using, your own MySQL setup. You're going to be using like a different database. And then we're doing some defaults. We're leaving the container port, 3306. We're setting the password for the root user as password. We're not doing anything special, right? Like this isn't secure. You definitely don't want to do this if you're running this live. This is just to kind of show you a demo of it. You're gonna make some changes here, right? All right, so let's go ahead and copy this. Go back over to the vCluster UI. And let's go ahead and go down here to where we have templates and vCluster, apps. We're gonna start with apps. We're gonna go down here where we have apps. So right now we've got a bunch of applications in here that you can use. I'm gonna create a new app with my template, and I'm gonna call it MySQL. And then I'm gonna just create it with kubectl. So I'm gonna paste in my YAML that I just showed off, and we are going to create this app. All right, so now we got a MySQL app, right? Like it's just got MySQL configuration. It's basically the same as if you're doing kubectl create with that information that we showed this, right? If you want to see all this stuff too, right? Like you can check out the description. I've got the blog post there, and in the blog post, I have all the resources and I go over how to set up and deploy all this stuff. So check out the description if you want the blog post. I'm just going to keep going live, but basically that, right? So we're not going to be able to write all that down and copy it over. But let's go over to the templates for virtual clusters, and we're going to create a new template now. So the idea behind this is I want to create a template. I'm kind of just showing off some of the ideas of what you can do in the vCluster platform. I'm going to create a template so that I can just include that application in this template, and whenever I want to deploy a MySQL database, I can just use this template, right? Probably not going to use this for MySQL all the time. You're probably going to use this for maybe like another application, like a test application or something like that you want to bring up, and make it easy for users to deploy a virtual cluster with, or maybe you do want a database. Maybe you want like just an easily accessible database for your developers to be able to access, so that they can do some work against it. But anyways, let's go ahead and we're going to leave everything pretty much default here. Let me check again. All right, so template MySQL. Did I change anything here? Let's use our updates for the blog so it actually looks the exact same. All right, so we're going to put in some information here. Core DNS enabled. We're going to host sync. We're going to host sync ingresses, and we're going to from host sync the ingress class in case we want to create ingress. We're not right now. We're just going to create a load balancer. And then we're going to go down here and we're going to select the MySQL app. And then we're going to create this template. Very basic template. Oh, my template. Oh, yeah, here. My template already exists. Let's make a new one. All right, so this is going to be the MySQL vCluster template. Make sure you update those names. All right, so now let's check it again. So the MySQL vCluster template, it did save with the app. All right, so now it's got a MySQL app. So now what we can do is go ahead and create that virtual cluster using that template. So if we go over here and we go create a cluster, and we select the new MySQL template that we just created and create the virtual cluster, we'll give that a minute or two to go ahead and come up. And then what we can do is we can connect to that MySQL database, and then we'll access it on the base cluster to kind of show you how to find the stuff, right? So if we go over to terminal and we do get service, and it's not up yet. All right, so what it's going to do is it's going to come up, it's going to deploy the application, it's going to request an ingress, or not ingress, it's going to request a load balancer. And then once it's completely up, we'll have a load balancer service that we can just kind of connect into and show, we can show off the MySQL database, and then show that like there's not any actual databases in there yet. But once we create the other virtual cluster, it'll connect and it'll add a database on its own. All right, let's make sure that I don't think I did anything wrong, right? Like it is right before the holidays, right? Like I'm saying, holiday brain. Let's see if I can actually get a demo out and kind of show it off. I guess let me go ahead and show this off while this is deploying. Since it's just deploying more than just the virtual cluster, it's deploying application. It might take a minute just to bring MySQL up, get it running, and then get a load balancer. We'll be able to see once we go over here and it comes up. All right, so this is something new that has been added to the vCluster platform, and it's called cost control, right? So now you get a visualization of how much money you're saving with sleep mode, how much you're saving with vCluster versus without vCluster for traditional clusters. And then you can kind of get an idea over time how much you've saved, right? This is a very small install. So over the course of 16 days, I've saved $258, some of it with $20 of it with like sleep mode. So a bunch of my stuff goes to sleep and then I'm not paying for it. You can set up your cost savings here so you can actually like decide how much these things cost. You can look at which projects and stuff are saving the most money and kind of figure that stuff out too. But basically go in here, modify some stuff. Say, maybe the vCPU core price per node is more than $31. Maybe, your average, RAM for a gig is more than $31 or 900. But this is where you kind of set up the values and how much stuff costs you. So you can kind of modify that and then kind of get these ideas about how much you're saving over the course of time. And then like you can see which ones are, staying asleep nonstop. So maybe you want to update that template that one's using to say delete after a certain amount of time, or like maybe you don't want it to be, just sitting there idle. Maybe you just want to delete it in case the developers aren't actually using it. But you kind of get some insights into how your stuff is running and how much you're actually saving by using a vCluster platform. Expect more in here over time, right? Like right now, it's just kind of a little bit of information for you to kind of do something with if you want to, or at least kind of see, how things are working and how much money you're actually saving versus like how much you would have been spending if you didn't have these things going to sleep. All right, let's see if our cluster is up. It is up. Let's go ahead and check for that load balancer. We've got a load balancer. All right, so I'm doing this all locally. Like I've got this on a local K3s cluster, and I'm using Metal LB for my load balancer service and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and show the connection to MySQL so you can see that. Give me a second. I'm just going to check my blog post, make sure I'm using the right commands. And then what we'll do is we'll create the secret for it too. All right, so let's use, all right, so we're gonna go MySQL sh URI root at that IP and then the port. And now we're in, right? So now what we can do is we can show databases and we have nothing in there. Basically, it's just all default right now, right? And then we can show or use, let's say show databases. Let's use MySQL. Use MySQL, show tables. All right, a bunch of just basic data that's already in there. What is it? It is quit. All right, and now we're disconnected. All right, so basically what I was showing there is just if you know, on the base server, you get services and you are just getting all of the services that are on the base cluster. The virtual cluster still creates on the base cluster, so you can kind of see information about what was created, right? Like I know I created a MySQL instance, so I just searched for MySQL, and then I got the load balancer IP address that I was gonna use. Now, you want to save that data because that information is what you're going to use to connect the external database stuff to it, right? So you're gonna need that string, or you're gonna need that IP address so you can create a connection string with that information. All right, so what do we do next? So after that, what we want to do is we want to create the database connector secret. So if we go over to our docs here, you can find all this information if you go to vcluster.com/docs/platform administer connector database. So it's under administer connector database. And this kind of gives you information about how to set stuff up, right? So what you want to do is you want to create a secret. So that this is how it works. You create a secret in the vCluster platform namespace. And then you put the information listed here, right? So we're going to tell it a name for this, which we need to save because we're going to reference that in the template for the vCluster template that we'll create that's connected to it. We need the namespace, which for us is going to be vCluster platform. We need this label here, so we'll just leave this default, and then some of the string data at the endpoint. So we need the IP address that we just pulled from the load balancer. We need the password, which in our case is going to be password. We need the port, which is going to be the default 3306, and then we need the user, which is going to be root. Now, this is kind of like an actual example that gives all that stuff filled in. But for us, we're not using a host name, but you could use a host name for this, like especially if you have a real database with a real endpoint. What we're going to do is set ours up and have it look a little bit like this. All right. And if you have any questions, yeah, let me know. I can stop and answer anything. But so ours, we're going to name it MySQL-ext-db. We're going to put it in the namespace vCluster platform, which is where vCluster is running. The platform is running. That's where we deployed it. It's just default. Our endpoint is going to be the IP address that I just showed you that we just connected to, a password, port, and then our user is root. All right, let me delete it first because I've already created it. That was one. Oop. Oh, all right, let me change my context. Change my context here. All right, we're in default. All right, so, all right, now we're in the right section. Let's go ahead and delete that again. All right, deleted. So now what we'll do is we'll go through the process and we'll create it. And then what we can do is kget secrets, grep-i, MySQL. Oh, kget secrets all namespaces because we're going to be, I don't know what you do. Like I usually just do all namespaces because I'm lazy and I don't want to specify the namespace, but sometimes you can just specify the namespace. It's a little bit easier. All right, so here we just created this. Our secret has been created. So now this is where the information about like the connection and all that stuff is going to live, right? Like you don't have to do plain text for all this. You can use, you can change this a little bit. But before, what was going to happen is this was going to live in the template. But now what we're doing is we're creating a secret, and instead of putting it in every template, it's going to reference that secret. So what we need to do now is we need to create a template for our vCluster. So like if you've already got a database and all that, the stuff that I just showed you right now, you're probably going to skip, right? Like you don't need to do all this. What we're doing is I just want to show off templates and how to set up a MySQL installation on a virtual cluster. But if you've already got your database set up, you're kind of skipping to this point right now. So what you want to do is go to the UI, and we're going to now create a new template, and we're going to reference that secret. So we're going to call this a vCluster external DB template. And we're going to use the default stuff. And then what we're going to do is go over and copy the template information. And then I will walk through what we're actually doing. All All right, so basically it's default. What we need to add in here is a backing store. So we're saying the backing store is a database, it's external, and the connector is that secret name that we just created in our vCluster platform namespace. We'll leave basically everything else default. We'll like leave sleep mode on there. Don't actually add that in. You could, so sleep mode, right? Like I could make it so that like if this doesn't actually get used, I put it to sleep. I can set it to sleep at a certain time. I can have it wake up at a certain time and all that. So like very useful for developers if they want to be able to work from 9 to whatever, 12, right? Or developers come in at like 11, right? Come in at 11, have that cluster up at like 10:45, so it's ready to go. And then work until what, like 6 or 7, and then have it go off. So you can kind of save some money by having those pods, all those pods scale to 0 instead of running these workloads nonstop. All right, so we've created this basic template. Like I said, if you want to be able to follow along and just kind of copy paste stuff over, the blog post is in the description. I've got all that stuff saved there. Eventually, I'll put it in GitHub too after I make a more polished video. But right now, we're just live streaming right before the holidays. So hopefully you're having a good time. And hopefully some of this information is kind of helpful and useful to you. But anyways, connector and MySQL external database. So now let's create this template. And if you remember, let's go ahead and connect to that database again. All right, so right now, if we show databases, right now we have just basically the default MySQL stuff, right? So we don't have anything special in here. But if we go over here now and we create a virtual cluster and we use that external database and we create this cluster and hope that everything works, because in the demo and everything worked fine. So hopefully this will work live too. But we'll let this create, and then what we should be able to see as it comes up is that it's going to create another database within that database, right? So it automates the database creation. So you're not going in and adding a database for every vCluster that you want to create and then having it connect in and create the connection string and all that, which previously that's what you're doing, is you're creating a database. You were taking that information, you're maybe adding a user if you want a user per database, and then obviously you're still probably gonna add like user stuff if you need to have like a, probably per project or something like that. Maybe a template per project so that you know who's creating the databases and stuff like that if you really need to figure it out. But anyways, instead of that, now what it does, it just connects to the database. It creates a new database in it, and then it'll actually just use that. So let's see if it's done it yet. Yep, there we go. So now show databases will show this right here, and that's actually going to be the, here, let me copy paste that so I can actually connect in. That's actually going to be from the new virtual cluster. So let's use it. Let's show tables. And then we've got kind in there. And it's basically the demo, right? So now it's using that database. It's not using SQLite, right? So it's using a database somewhere else. Hopefully, like you're going to use a database that's like a little bit faster and that you're backing up and that you've already got configured. Right now, this is just a database running in a virtual cluster, but that gives you kind of the idea of how that works. All right, let me see. What else can I show off? That basically shows off the whole demo that I had. It's pretty short because it's just setting up a couple of templates and getting the virtual clusters running. But this virtual cluster now is using that MySQL database that we just created right here. And it is storing data for the virtual cluster's state and stuff in there instead of using the local SQLite. Now, for the most part, I guess if you're just doing lightweight stuff, you're probably just going to use SQLite. But if you've got kind of advanced stuff and you're going to be using, vCluster in HA instead of just being like one single vCluster pod running, and you want it to be HA because maybe you're running production stuff within it, or maybe you're running a SaaS or something like that, and you need backups and being able to restore it and that kind of stuff, then you're going to want to have like a real relational database, right? Like, and then connect to that, especially if you're using like, was it like AWS RDS or something like that on Amazon, and you're already managing that. It's going to give you a little bit more peace of mind being able to back up everything there and then have that backed up and restore in case you've got a bunch of like data in it and you need to, either disaster recovery for bringing that back up or bringing it up somewhere else, right? Maybe you want to back it up there and then migrate it over and bring it up somewhere else. But that's basically the idea. So what else can I show off? Let's see. If anyone has any questions or comments, just let me know. Like, I'll answer some stuff. Basically, I just kind of wanted to show off, a little bit about cost control and then the external database connector. Probably do some streams when we get back next year. Maybe I'll show off some more demos. We're gonna do some more GitOps type stuff. We did just post a video recently of Kurt showing off how he does POC deployment and that kind of stuff, which is actually pretty interesting, where he's just managing most of the stuff in GitHub, makes an update, it updates a template, and then it'll update his deployment to stuff if he wants to as well, because you can sync the templates, because everything in vCluster platform is a CRD, right? Like this is a CRD, so I can, the templates and all that stuff are CRDs and stuff too, to where I can go in and I can automate the creation of the stuff, right? Like, because there's more stuff than just what I showed off. Like you can also have it automatically add to Argo CD, right? Like, so if I'm doing like a preview environment or something like that, I can create a cluster, automatically add it to Argo CD, and then have Argo CD deploy to that cluster, the preview environment with whatever code the person put up for the PR. So kind of cool stuff like that. But this basically, the platform is a little bit shorter of a stream than I thought it was going to be. I got through the demo pretty quick. I don't know if you want to see anything else related to it. I guess kind of some information about like next year. Okay, so I can also kind of show off like what sleep mode stuff is, right? Like some of these clusters I'm just setting up to get stats on cost control. So instead of actually running them nonstop, because I'm not actually using them for the most part, this cluster has been asleep for most of its life, right? Like for 98% of the time this cluster's been created, it's been asleep. And I just woke it up about 45 minutes ago. That way I could actually kind of show off like upgrading and updating the templates and all that stuff. But all these clusters, like if they're not getting used and you configure, sleep mode, they're just going to go to sleep. It's going to scale down the virtual cluster. It's going to scale down the workloads and all that stuff. And then when there is connectivity or activity hitting the API for vCluster or trying to access the applications, it's going to spin it back up. So like that's interesting if you're doing stuff like, expanding your worker nodes, automatically like scaling out based on workloads. And once you get to a certain point, adding additional ones, because these are going to, for the most part, kind of stay asleep if they're not being used. So if developers like using it for like an hour or two, it'll get used and then it'll go down. Now, some of the things that you got to think about too is like if you're adding this to Argo CD, you're gonna have to configure something to say ignore that Argo CD traffic. Otherwise, Argo CD is going to hit it nonstop to make sure that what Argo CD wants deployed is deployed and the state matches. But let me think, what else can I show off? I don't know. Next year, hopefully we're gonna have some more like vCluster, like office hours type stuff too. So if you have questions about vCluster, we'll talk about that. I think a lot of people are probably gonna start trying out vCluster early next year. I'm sure people heard about it at KubeCon last month, but it's kind of hard to get new initiatives started at the end of the year. Maybe you can do some like pet projects and play around, but I'm sure a lot of people are going to get started in the beginning of the year. So hopefully we'll have some new content and different things to kind of help you get started. We got a bunch of videos and stuff that we've done previously, but we're going to start doing more videos about use cases, like showing how to do start to finish, not super opinionated stuff, but some stuff like using, GitHub and doing GitOps and showing how you can automate a lot of the stuff, which is really using more of the power of using the platform versus just using the OSS, because a lot of that stuff is kind of configured for you. That way you can, deploy stuff using this, hitting this endpoint here and having a public endpoint hit, especially if you're doing a lot of stuff on-prem and you don't want to expose the endpoint with something else. So basically what I did on here is I did, vCluster platform start, and it gave me a public host name that I can use. You can set up your own, right? Like, or you can have it actually just all be internal if you wanted to. But should be able to show off some cool like GitOps stuff and showing off how to do preview environments and that kind of thing. And then everything that I show, I'm going to have documented somewhere. What I showed off today is in the blog, like I said, but then I'll start putting stuff into our GitHub. Let me show you. Like I've already got some of the GitHub stuff set up for examples. So I already got a bunch of example stuff in here. Like we've got how to do, Metal LB, how to do EKS, how to add a virtual cluster to, or how to deploy a virtual cluster with Argo CD and Helm, and then different vCluster YAML examples, like how to get started with vCluster YAML to begin with. This is how you used to do it, right? So I showed off today, like how to do the external database. This is how you used to do it. You used to do this per like vCluster, but like I said, now it's just a template. And instead of the template, we're using a secret. So it's a little bit more secure, a little bit easier to configure and set up, especially if you don't want each user to have to create their own database within that database or to set it up beforehand. But that's about it. It's about what I got. Hopefully that was interesting. I'll hang out for another minute or two, see if anybody has any questions. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in. I can answer them. But like I said, if you're watching this after the fact, post in comments or join Slack and reach out, and I can answer some of that stuff. But then you should be able to watch back too and see what I showed off if you got in late. I also have the upgrade here, so we can upgrade this to a new version. A bunch of cool, like just built-in stuff that makes it a little bit easier to manage the virtual clusters. Add to Argo CD. I can add these to Argo CD if I wanted to, and then deploy to them. All kinds of cool stuff like that. But sorry, it's a little bit shorter of a stream. I thought my demo would take a little bit longer. Next time, I'll see if I can get a little bit more stuff set up beforehand, and then maybe do like 2 demos or something like that. I thought the cost control would take a little bit longer too, but for the most part, as we add more stuff, the cost control stuff should look a little bit even better than it does now. Right now, I think it looks good. I think it's a good start, right? Like, it kind of gives you a breakdown of, you know, how much you're saving like weekly with sleep mode, with clusters, and then how much you're saving, you know, daily. And then as I actually get the data for monthly, I can show that off, right? This is brand new, so I've been running this for a couple of weeks with the alpha and the beta, trying to get as much data as I can. But then as you add in more like stuff like EKS and all that, you're going to see much higher numbers. Like, right, literally all this is running is a couple of virtual clusters on my local machine, which is just K3s running on a couple of virtual machines. But thanks for joining. See you when we get back next year. I'll do some weekly demos, hopefully add a little bit more interesting stuff to weekly demos like KubeVirt, maybe show this off, maybe show some Argo CD stuff and all that. Maybe start building out themed weekly demos beyond just kind of beyond just teaching you how to actually create resources and things in vCluster platform. But thank you for joining, and I will see you next time. I'm going to try to, like I said, I'm going to try to stream a little bit more next year, I think, because it's been fun so far. But thanks so much.